Hello, I'm Kyle Dalton, the Membership and Development Coordinator for the National Museum of Civil War Medicine.
And I'm Olivia Peterson. I work on the collection staff here at the museum.
And today we're going to be talking about some of these prosthetic limbs that we're trying to restore, that we're raising money for.
So Kyle, can you begin telling us what we're looking at here?
Sure. We've got 3 artificial limbs. We have 2 prosthetic legs and a prosthetic arm. The legs, we reached out to the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Silver Spring, Maryland. They're a great museum, and one of their experts there identified these as Palmer-style legs. Palmer, Benjamin Franklin Palmer, was a New Englander, and he patented the first prosthetic leg in the United States in 1846. And these are based on that, if not made by him. A third of all Union veterans who lost a leg received a Palmer Company leg. But he did say, this expert said, that these were Palmer-style legs because a lot of them were knockoffs. Other people picked up on it because of the innovations that he achieved. He would try to seal gaps between them. He tried to give them realistic-looking motion, which is why you see that the toes, the false toes, are articulated. They bend a little bit. So he tried to make these comfortable, he tried to make them look as realistic as possible, and it remained the primary type of prosthetic leg into World War I. Now, working with Palmer was Marvin Lincoln, and he created this arm here. The Lincoln arm was developed during the Civil War. So even though they worked together in the 1840s when these were made, Marvin Lincoln made this arm himself in response to the casualties of the Civil War. As you know, and probably as you know, there are a lot of amputations in the Civil War, at least 60,000. And there is a dire need for more things like this, more artificial legs, more artificial limbs. And so in response to that, in 1863, he invents and patents this arm, which remains the Army's choice for veterans into World War I, another 50 years. Lincoln himself was an interesting guy. He was an agent of the Underground Railroad. He was part of a couple of different associations in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Anti-Manhunting League, which is a heck of a name, and the Massachusetts League of Freedmen. He worked with John Brown before John Brown's famous raid, and he helped to get enslaved people to freedom in Canada after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. So he was a staunch abolitionist, and being too old to serve in the war, he saw this as his way of supporting the veterans who did sacrifice to preserve the Union and end slavery. So it's got a fascinating story to it. It's a really interesting piece with a carefully articulated thumb that allows for grabbing and holding things, a hand that can be detached and replaced with tools, and a locking mechanism in the elbow so that you can fix it in place. There were veterans who became blacksmiths after the war and were still able to do their job. There were farmers who were still able to plow. Obviously, it's not perfect. It's not as good as a lot of the prosthetic arms we have today. One man complained that he couldn't really use it to eat food except to hold the food in place so he could cut it. But otherwise, it was a huge leap beyond what they had before. So it's a very important piece of abolitionist history, of Civil War history, and of medical history. And we want to make sure that these are preserved and displayed for future generations. So along with that, being on the collection staff here, I know that we've got some issues with these items, and that's one of the reasons we're raising money for it. What kind of things need to be done on these pieces?
So for a lot of the pieces, it's going to be fixing up the paint that's starting to basically flake off. A lot of the arm and also this leg here has that paint that's going to need to be basically stabilized. There's also been a lot of iron corrosion and leather corrosion. So the leather components, the iron components are going to need to be stabilized. As for the legs, there's going to need to be realignment of the joints and things like that, so it's easier to be stored in a safer way. And then surface cleaning and fabricating storage mounts.
Yeah, I can see a lot of the corrosion on a lot of these pieces, on the leather and on the metal.
Sure.
This one here looks especially corroded.
Yeah, so this leg was, from our records, was found in the Monocacy River. And so a lot of the wood has been kind of dried out and it's incredibly fragile. So that's going to be part of the conservation effort there.
Well, sitting in a river, I guess that's why it's so rusted up.
Right, exactly.
So that's what we're here for, is to restore these items, to display them, to tell these stories, and to have them available for the public. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for helping to bring a collection's eye on this. If you'd like to contribute, be sure to check out the link below. We're getting very close to our goal now, and you can help us to push it just a little bit further and get us across the finish line to help make sure that these important pieces of medical history are preserved for future generations.